Champaign County Agriculture Today with your host, Dennis Riggs.
To Champaign County Agriculture Today. My name is Dennis Riggs, your host for the next 30 minutes. We're going to talk about some really neat things today. You know, you're probably sitting there thinking, now, why should I be interested in agricultural products? Well, as you can see here later on in our program, we have a whole room full of things that are made from agricultural products, started in the fields right here in East Central Illinois. And of course, that means mainly corn and soybeans. So if you thought corn and soybeans were only to feed livestock, or to maybe make sweet corn or to make popcorn or whatever, listen in today, because we've got some really interesting things I think you're going to see that you use agricultural products in your everyday life. And to talk about that today, we have two great experts with us today. We'll start off with Julie. Julie Toohill is the communications manager with the Illinois Soybean Association, and she's going to be talking about some of the soy products. And on my far left is Mark Lambert. Mark is with the Illinois Corn Growers Association and serves as their communications director. Mark, it's good to have you on the program today. So let's just find out a little bit of background. Julie, first of all, from you, soybeans. Now, how did you ever get started in the soybean business? Give me a little of your background.
Sure. I've worked with the Soybean Association for about 2 years. And had done several other things before that, all involving agriculture. I have a degree in ag business from Illinois State, and had worked in lots of different areas, but had an opportunity to work for the checkoff board and then also our association side, and working with growers across the state on ways to promote soybeans.
Has your work always been in the uses of soybeans or the growing of soybeans? What's your expert there?
Well, actually, and Mark will appreciate this, my career before this was actually working with corn. I did corn products research for a seed corn company. And then I actually did a short time with radio and have done different sales positions in ag throughout my career. But I grew up on a farm in northern Illinois and have always been involved in things that relate back to the farm.
So you've known soybeans since soybeans weren't even cool.
Exactly. I've known soybeans since I used to have to walk the field.
Those bring back great memories right there. All right, well, thanks a lot. It's good to have you with us today, Julie. Let's go to Mark Lambert. Mark with the Corn Growers Association based out of Bloomington, Illinois. Mark, give us a little bit of background of where you're from, where you went to school, and what your business has been here the last few years.
Well, I've been with the Corn Growers Association for 18 years. So I've done a lot of work in corn and almost 2 decades worth, which is pretty amazing considering my background. I actually went into my career in journalism. That's how I started out of college, writing a lot of stories about business. And of course, when you're covering business in Illinois, agriculture is at the top of the list. And I found that out in a hurry, so I ended up doing a lot of stories about agriculture. And one day, as the corn growers started seeing all the uses that were popping up for corn and thought they had a pretty good story to tell, and they came to me and asked me to help them tell it. As far as my school, I went to Illinois State University right in Bloomington, so I have not strayed very far.
Well, they haven't thrown you out of town either, would be the good way of looking at that. Well, folks, you two are experts in the utilization of the agricultural products that we grow here in East Central Illinois. The list is long and varied. Julie, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about soybeans. Give me just kind of the range of things. Are they just food? Is it plastics? What type of stuff is made out of soybeans?
Well, we like to say that soybeans are the miracle crop, and we talk about a lot of the amazing innovations of soybeans. Of course, I always have to preface anything with new uses of saying that 94% of all the soybeans that we grow go to feed livestock. So that's by far the majority. However, there are a lot of new uses that are emerging, and we're seeing those in everything from biodiesel, which a lot of people are increasingly becoming more familiar with. So that, again, livestock feed, then some biodiesel usage. But we have plastics, there's fabrics. Of course, soy foods is a big market. Crayons, candles, I mean, we could just go the whole gamut of things.
So not just food stuff and not just plastics, but a lot of things in between. Right here in East Central Illinois, there's a newspaper called the News Gazette that's printed here in Champaign-Urbana. People might not realize that's printed with a soy product. Tell us a little bit about that.
Exactly. The paper is printed with soy ink, and actually over 3,000 daily newspapers in the United States are printed with soy ink, and that accounts for about 95% of all the dailies. USA Today uses it, Boston Globe, the LA Times. So some of the real big papers are using soy ink. And the reason a lot of people went to it is because it's a clearer printing ink. The colors are more vibrant, and as it's emerged, people have really started to embrace it.
Is it safe to say that this is a lot like the soy diesel, where the soy oil is displacing a petroleum product, or is it in addition to?
It would be displacing
Okay.
in most cases, and that's a lot of the things that we'll talk about today. And I think it's the same thing with
Right.
our corn, is we're displacing petroleum products.
Coming from the newspaper business, I was actually working at the paper when they started introducing soy inks, and I'll tell you there was another reason why they did it, which a lot of the products that they were having to dispose of, the Environmental Protection Agency didn't like them a whole lot. They were pretty hazardous, and it was expensive to get rid of them. The soybean-based inks are very environmentally safe. So.
Right.
Well, Mark, let's continue on with the corn products. Once again, we're all familiar with ethanol, the fuel replacement. What other range of things are made from corn products?
Well, since you were talking about the inks, I'm going to tell you one that probably even you're not aware of with your vast knowledge of agriculture. Did you know that there was a corn-based ink as well?
No, I did not.
It's not in mass distribution, but a lot of the inks that they use for stamping carcasses it actually comes from corn. It's because it's coming in contact with human food. They wanted something that was safe and edible, and they actually make that USDA stamp that goes onto the pork carcasses and onto beef carcasses. It actually comes from corn.
Cool. Well, there you go. So we have a wide range of things. Well, Julie, let's go back to you, and let's talk about consumables, something that you could eat. Of course, we realize that in the processing of soybeans, you usually end up with meal and oil as the two things that result of the crush. Give us an idea of some things that we may not recognize that has soy as far as a consumable product.
Well, I think a lot of times the question I get is people say, oh, tofu. And when they think soy foods, that's what they think the first thing. And one of the things, and I know Mark and I talk about this a lot, is that if people realized how much they were consuming of both corn and soybeans, they'd be surprised. Because you don't have to go out and buy tofu or soy milk to be consuming it. It's in everyday products. If you buy a cracker or a cookie or any sort of baked product that has to have a shelf life, typically that's using some sort of soybean oil in that. It's the oil that's involved, or flour is being used in a lot of these products as well. Of course, there are the things like tofu and soy milk, and one of the things, especially when I'm talking with kids, that I ask them if they've all eaten at McDonald's, which of course a lot of them have, but they may not have gotten it, but their parents may have gotten it. There's actually a salad at McDonald's now that has edamame, which is the green soybean. And so it's becoming more of a consumer accepted product. And actually a lot of times on salad bars and things like that, they're now offering the edamame. And it's fun to be in line at a salad bar and have people think that they're getting lima beans. And when I point out that they're green soybeans, they're always a little surprised.
Well, that's cool. It's even more fun to say than lima beans.
It is,
yeah,
edamame.
I like that.
What a great word.
Now, are those grown in Illinois? Where are those beans grown at?
There are some grown in Illinois, but again, here in Illinois, most of our focus is on growing, just our regular soybeans. There's not a lot of specialty growth that's going on here. And actually, a lot of them are imported,
Okay.
some of the specialty products. But there is tofu production that's going on here. In fact, the University of Illinois has the Illinois Center for Soy Foods. So they do a lot of work on identifying new ways to incorporate soy foods into people's diets.
We're going to pull one item off your shelf, and for the folks watching at home, we have lots of things lined up here that we're going to show every once in a while. But you have some soy crisps
Soy
here.
crisps.
Why don't you explain those a little bit to us and what
Right.
those are all
I don't know
about?
if I've got that's the soy crisp. They're almost like a potato chip. They're like rice cakes, and they
Okay.
use soy instead of the rice part of it. And they're great. I think Mark was getting hungry. He was going to eat some of them. if we
Well,
let
we may
him.
have to do that here after the show is over with. All right, well, Mark, let's switch over to you and let's talk about corn for a second.
Okay.
Of course, we're all familiar, and of course, people a lot of times mix up sweet corn, popcorn with yellow dent, which is the main corn that we
Right.
grow here in central Illinois. I stumbled across one the other day, those corn nuts, those baked corn nuts. That's kind of interesting. Give me something else that is used as a foodstuff using corn.
Well, I always try and get people to realign their thinking in terms of corn, because really all it is, it's chemical building blocks. They can break that kernel of corn down into several components, and each one, whether it be the fructose, the sweetener in the corn, there's actually several sweeteners that come from corn, there's starch products, there's protein, and there's oil. And each one of those can be used for a lot of different things. And because of that versatility, if you were to go into a common grocery store today, a good size one, because most of them are pretty large, probably 20,000 square feet, there's probably over 3,000 products on the shelves that contain corn in some fashion. So you really almost need to know how to look for it. A good example right up here would be the Dial soap. It has a product in there that's called sorbitol, and sorbitol comes from corn. It's in toothpaste as well. So I mean, it's just very versatile. It goes into everything from the charcoal you use in your grill in the summer to fabrics today. It's amazing all the things that are surfacing.
Expand on that idea for just a second. You talked about being such a natural product, and let's zoom in on corn here, for example, for you, Mark. Being a natural product, when it's used in a foodstuff, it's got to be a win-win situation for the consumer.
Well, it's a very healthy product. There's no doubt about it. Corn oil has been, and soy oil too. If you actually rate the various oils out there, I mean, they are very highly ranked in terms of the health benefits. And each one has its strengths in terms of what you use it for. So it's a good range of products. People really ought to look for the labels to see what's in them and buy Illinois products.
Well, that's a good point, Mark. And specifically on the label, it wouldn't just say corn. What types of things would be in that ingredients label that they should be looking for?
Well, I mentioned sorbitol. There's a whole range of sweeteners from maltose and dextrose to fructose. The protein products are generally going to the livestock industry, so you don't see those. And then the whole kernel of corn is going into everything from corn chips and tortillas. The sweeteners are in virtually everything. I mean, they're in ketchup, salad dressings. It's everywhere. You start looking for the various list of sweeteners, it's in a lot of products.
Okay, well, that sounds good. We'll have to keep an eye out. I know it's hard to think, well, you just flip the bag over. I'm going to grab this bag of soy crisp here and look, I'm not looking for actual soybeans. Help me out here, Julie. What should I look for on my list of ingredients, and how would it normally be in a soy-based food product?
Well, typically what you'll see, the majority of what you'll find in the store will be partially hydrogenated soybean oil.
Okay.
And of course, that's something that has been in the news as we deal with the trans fat issue. Because under the way that we typically would partially hydrogenate soybean oil, it does create trans fats. But we're working with the industry to address both a new oils we can get out of that, and also new ways to process it to address the trans fat issue. But for instance, if we look at this, it says right on there, soy flour. And so that's typically, we don't have as many of the different ingredients. It's usually going to say either soybean oil or soy flour would be the two main ways you would find soy products on things. And again, we're finding things in the freezer section of your store if you eat soy burgers and things like that. And a lot of folks tend to think that it's just for people who have eliminated meat from their diet. So if they're either living a vegetarian or a vegan lifestyle. But what we're finding is that a lot of people are just finding new ways to incorporate the soy into their diet. So they may blend some of the soy crumbles, which is, again, another way to use it, incorporate that in with their ground beef or their ground pork to just add some protein, additional protein into what they're consuming. And also, we do have a FDA health claim that's associated with soy foods. And that is consuming 25 grams of soy per day may decrease the likelihood of having heart disease.
Just recently, there's been a lot of talk about the vitamin E and the soy, just like you speak about there. Has that reached a peak? Are there new things they're finding out about the health benefits of eating soy?
Well, and we continue to look, and anything that relates to human health, whether it's some of the things when we talk about using genetically modified crops or anything that goes into our diet is under intense scrutiny. And so there have been some challenges to our health claim, but the way that we would address that is by saying if you're using soy, typically you're using it in your diet to replace a cholesterol-inducing food. So you may be using it as a blend with some of the other meat products, or you may be using it in place of that. So if you're reducing the amount of cholesterol-inducing foods and replacing it with soy, that's going to improve your overall health. And of course, there's a lot of science that has gone into studying the effects of soy for women who are in menopause, and the phytoestrogens that are in there that mimic the estrogen that, of course, women are starting to be lacking as they go through menopause. So a lot of times people or women are incorporating that into their diet in place or in addition to hormone replacement therapy.
So the health benefits seem to be very obvious. Let's approach this from a different angle. And Mark, I'll turn to you first. When you have products that have a corn base in them, does it affect the price? Does it make the price go a lot higher or lower? Have you seen much research how the price is affected for the consumer?
I think one of the reasons that corn is in so many products, and soybeans as well, is that it is abundant. You know, we've been very, very productive, and the yields on both of those crops continue to go up. So as a result, the manufacturers are, you know, they're looking for ingredients that aren't only functional in their processing, but something that's going to be healthy that they can promote and consumers are going to want to buy. And they're businesses, so they want something that's cost effective. So that's exactly why they use them.
So not only is it promotable, but it also helps out the price. Julie, I'll turn to you. As we see soy replacing other products in foodstuffs, what's it do to the price?
Really, I would just echo what Mark said. Again, as I said at the very beginning, 94% of all of our soybeans are going into feeding livestock. So that's where the majority of our market pressures or things that would affect our price are going to come from. But anytime that we're finding new uses and new ways to use up the soybeans that we're producing, we may not see, oh my goodness, the consumption of soy milk has gone up, and we can see a direct trend line as it affects price. But when we're able to use up the supplies that we have, it's positive for the marketplace.
Sounds like a lot of great research that has brought these products to market. My question is, who's doing this research? Is it the farmers out there in their tool shed? Is it the food companies? This is made by
Genesoy.
so folks in, where's that at?
It looks like that is in California.
Okay, out in California. Are these companies, is it commodity organizations such as yourselves? Where's the research going on to increase the usage of these products?
Well, from the soybean perspective, a lot of it starts with investments that we're making through the soybean checkoff. So what all of the farmers are paying, soybean farmers are paying into. A lot of times that's where the base for any of these uses that we want to talk about, whether it's foods or biodiesel or the fabrics that we have up there. A lot of it starts at that level where farmers who hope to impact their market start making those investments into the research. But the goal is that eventually that goes over to industry. Because of course, if we have a market or a product that's marketable, whether it's soy crisps or candles, the hope would be that, again, the marketplace will take that over and they'll start promoting the products. But research is done all the way from that level with the checkoff. University of Illinois does a lot of research on especially soy foods, but other usage. And then again, it goes over to industry.
Mark, I'll turn to the corn industry here for just a second. We are here in East Central Illinois, where of course the U of I is active in many different areas. What type of research is going on, whether it be consumer-based, farmer-based, or university-based, as far as the new uses of corn products in our diet?
Well, research has been real fundamental to all these advances you're seeing. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that the larger a company is, the less innovative they tend to be. They don't like risk, and so that tends to cut down on the innovation. So one of the roles that our organizations fill is doing research that nobody else is doing. We're looking for new ideas and trying to get those to the level where it piques their interest, and then those companies will investigate it and take it over. It's at the point they usually look at it, it's something that's proven that can work, and it even shows them how they can integrate it into their operation. And a good example of that would be ethanol. The Illinois Corn Marketing Board has been putting money into research on how to make ethanol, but what to do with the byproducts for probably 20 years, easily, a lot of money. And you've seen what's happened with that market today. It's grown almost every year, and now we're in a growth mode that people have only dreamed of.
Mark, when you have these corn products that are grown and made into consumables, does it utilize the entire corn kernel? Is there a byproduct, or does it depend on the product we're talking about? It can be both.
Well, the goal is they do use it all, but the goal is to have as many uses as possible to make it as valuable as possible. So you want those co-products coming out of it to be something that people want and they're willing to pay for it. You know, one of the things that's currently out there that there hasn't been a lot of market for it is the fiber coming from the corn kernel. A lot of that fiber has been passing through in the ethanol production process into the livestock feed, which works great for cattle and works fine for dairy, but hogs, which we raise a lot of here in Illinois, and poultry, which we sell a lot of corn to down in the south and southeastern United States, they don't like that fiber. So that's, you know, we're finding ways to isolate that, to remove it, and to actually show products that it can be used for. So it'll actually be one more thing, and it's going to add value to that bushel of corn.
Very good. Okay, Julie, let's take this scenario. I'm driving through Central Illinois out on the interstate, and I see a crop of soybeans. By the way, that's the smaller ones, the 3-foot compared to the 8-foot corn. I always like to point that out. There is a big difference. Can I see a difference between the soybeans that are going to be used for biodiesel or the soybeans that are going to go into my soy chips? Is there any difference?
No, in fact, in a lot of cases, they would be the exact same bean. So the protein would be used for one side, and again, we said when we looked at this was the soy flour, so that would come from the protein, and then the soy oil would be what would be used for the biodiesel. And so, again, just by driving by, you wouldn't know. There are some specialty things where people are growing specifically for tofu beans or the edamame that we talked about before. And there's
likes
some
saying
of
that.
that.
That is a
do.
big, I love
do
that
like
word. Yeah.
And there's some of that in Illinois, but again, we have such great markets here, especially in this area, that we don't see a lot of the specialty production because our farmers are able to market their grain here without having to identify other uses. But again, same thing. We split that out. Really, there's the two different portions. So there's the meal side and there's the oil side, and they both have different uses.
As a follow-up to that, I know here in Illinois we're seeing an emerging market of organically grown vegetables, fruits. How about soybeans? Is there a market for that as well?
There is. When you look at it, though, about 98% of the soybeans that are grown in Illinois are genetically modified, and most of those are for herbicide-tolerant traits. But there's still a market for that, especially things that we're exporting for food uses to other countries. For the Asian market, for instance, there's a big interest in the tofu or the other types of soy foods, but they want that to be a non-GMO or a conventionally grown.
Mark, let's go to the corn side of the equation. We've answered 2 or 3 questions there. Help me out first. Can you tell a difference between the corn that's being grown for ethanol and the corn that's being grown for corn nuts, let's say?
Not really.
Not really, okay.
And there are some major differences, and it's getting more and more specialized every day. That's one thing that's unique about Illinois. Like Julie said, a lot of the livestock industry uses our product. We probably feed close to 60% of the corn grown in the United States to livestock. That's not necessarily the case here in Illinois. We do feed a fair amount, but it's kind of divided in thirds in Illinois. A large part of it goes into processing. Probably about 30% of it goes into the processing industry. So we really are kind of at the epicenter for new uses. When they're testing new varieties of corn, they come here first because they want to find out how they're going to grow and how they're going to work. One of the things that's really just emerging now is they're developing and they're starting to market here in the last couple of years corn that's grown just for ethanol production. In order to get what they want the most of, which is the ethanol, they're coming up with varieties that have a lot of usable starch in it, which is what they convert into the ethanol fuel. So that's the kind of things that they do. They can actually customize that corn kernel now for what they want. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, let's follow up on that as far as the overseas markets. Are we seeing a demand for corn-based foodstuffs from overseas markets? Are they looking to the United States as a source for that? Or is it still mainly a domestic market?
Well, exports is big for us as well. That's the other part of that, the thirds I was telling you about on the corn market. We export actually some years as much as 50% of the corn in Illinois. And that's probably been the high. But so there's a lot of demand overseas for corn. And as we make more ethanol, we're finding that there's interest in the distilled dried grains, which are the protein part that comes out of the ethanol plant. And I think a lot of people are starting to experiment with that because they see more corn going into ethanol, and they can see a point down the road where they'll have better access to the concentrated protein in those distilled dried grains than they will the actual corn kernel. And it's an excellent feed product, so it actually will save them money in transportation because they get more protein in a smaller container.
Well, on another program, I'm going to tell our audience that we're going to continue this discussion and talk about more of the non-consumable products, more of the commercial plastics and inks and starches and that type of thing. So I hope people will tune in for that later on. But the main thing I wanted to follow up on now is, where is the future? I know in the past I've heard about medical uses that we grow for our corn and soybeans. Julie, let's switch to you. Is there anything new coming down the pike that research is now working on that may become commercial in the near future?
Well, I think a lot of it is just, as Mark was saying, refining what we have available. And we talked a little bit before about the trans fat issue with some of the partially hydrogenated soybean oil. And so we have new products that are available, new varieties that are coming online. In fact, this will be our first growing season upcoming in Illinois where we have access to those. They're the low linolenic soybeans. And what that means and why that matters is it's a way to reduce the trans fats that are in the soybean oil. And same thing that they're seeing on the corn side, we're seeing some on the soybean side as well, where our farmers are able to identify what their market is. So if they're growing to feed a biodiesel plant, they're growing soybeans that have higher oil content. If they're in an area that's more concentrated with livestock, then they can concentrate more on growing a high protein level soybean. And again, there's constantly new uses being identified, whether it's at the commercial end with new types of soy foods or just new ways to incorporate it into already existing foods, or some of the more niche things that we see coming up. But every day we learn about something new that's coming down the line.
I would assume, Mark, that that type of enthusiasm and hope for the future is also in the corn industry. Is there any kind of cool things you can kind of clue us in here to keep us looking for the news in the future?
We're really just scratching the surface on what they can do with the corn plant. As they begin to really understand genetics, I think they've got virtually the entire corn plant, the genome map now. So now that they have that knowledge, they need to figure out what it all means and what they do with it. And one of the things that they think they're going to be able to do is to actually incorporate pharmaceutical products into food. What does that mean? Well, they tell people they need to put more fish in their diet. Well, most people in the Midwest that I know, at least a lot of them, don't seem to like fish much because we've never had access to it years ago, and we never learned to eat as much as some people do in the world. There's the potential to put those healthy fats into corn and probably ultimately soybeans and make them even better. So they can get it through a host of products. So they can decide how they get their healthy products in their body, and it can be through corn and soybean products.
Does the changing of the corn plant and the introduction of these genetic traits, are there risks involved with that?
In terms of the
food
plant
output.
breeding, it really is not widely different from the way they've always done plant breeding. But their understanding of the plant, what it's allowed them to do is to speed up the process. What used to take them, a decade to do now, they can probably do in a year or two. Of course, then there's the years of testing they have to do to make sure it's safe before it comes on the market. So it's highly regulated, so it's very safe.
Yeah, and the things that Mother Nature has done over the years to naturally select a superior protein over another one, it's just that our scientists are kind of helping that out and making it go a little bit quicker. Okay, in just a little bit of time we got left, Julie, tell me one of the most exciting products, non-food, that we'll talk about in our next program.
I think one of the coolest things, and I just found out about it, are teddy bears that are made out of fabric from soybeans.
I can't wait. Okay, Mark, how about give me a non-food product made out of corn we'll talk about on a different program.
I think it's got to be not just ethanol, but biofuels in general and what it's going to mean for agriculture in this country.
Okay, fantastic. Well, folks, thank you so much for being with us. What an exciting time to be involved in agriculture, whether you're a producer, an industry leader, or a consumer, because all these things are natural and things that could really help us out. And that's why we appreciate you being with us today. As we talk about modern agriculture, we hope that you create an understanding of what the crops that we grow here in East Central Illinois can do for you, and that way you just don't think, well, it's a cornfield or a bean field out there. So tune in to us again next time when we have a chance to explore more issues here on Champaign County Agriculture Today. I'm Dennis Riggs. Thanks for listening.
Champaign County Agriculture Today is brought to you by Champaign County Farm Bureau.